let's now start to take a closer look at the Miller Homes development application. On the 16th of July 2013, Fiona Tiplady's department provided full pre-application advice to Miller Homes, which was also followed by 2 design panel reviews. Then, 6 months later, on the 20th of January 2014, Miller Homes submitted a full planning application for 268 dwellings and integral public open space with associated access, parking and landscaping on land at Simpson Green, Appley Bridge. If you watched the previous video, you will already know that Bradford's council neglected to maintain its 5-year rolling forward replaced unitary development plan, and therefore made any arguments the council may have put forward for refusing the application legally untenable. Naturally, with a proposed development of this size, there was going to be a few objections. It in fact attracted over 600 individual objections via the council's planning portal. Now, it is important to note that for all concerned parties, this portal was the primary source of information relating to the proposed development, and any malfunction to the portal's operation could have adverse consequences for the objectors opposing the proposed development. Most of these objections were basically highlighting the usual issues: large housing estate being built on Greenfield's site, houses not needed and are in fact unaffordable to local people. The local schools are already full, traffic is already a nightmare, and the proposed 4-storey high duplex flats will spoil the view at Dobson's Lock, which is a local beauty spot. Clearly, this application was going to be determined by Bradford Council's Regulatory and Appeals Committee, and that was to take place on Thursday the 4th of September 2014. However, there were 2 appeals to be heard that day, Court Farm and Simpson Green, and they were certainly not unrelated, so let's now take a wider look at the bigger picture. Here we have Simpson Green, and about half a mile away we have Court Farm, on which it was proposed to build 270 new houses on the former Greenbelt land. Bradford Council have already had to concede that the local schools are operating at and above pupil capacity, and that any additional pupil numbers resulting from new builds simply could not be absorbed into local schools without extensions being made to existing schools or new schools being built, a point reflected in the S106 agreement. Recently, over 100 children were refused and denied a place within one of their local schools. Furthermore, the Bradford Council are placing pressure on the governors of Idle C of E School to increase their pupil admission numbers from 30 to 60 by 2015. Now, Bradford's Council have made much of the lack of affordable housing within Bradford's boundaries. In fact, Councillor Warburton summed the situation up as thus.
A major dearth of housing across the district, a major dearth of housing in Bradford North and in this area, and for me this would be a proposal that would go forward.
Perhaps he wasn't aware that in 2013 Bradford had over 8,000 dwelling properties that remained vacant and empty. He seemed unaware that a significant number of affordable and rentable houses was now on stream as a result of the ongoing housing regeneration on the Thorpe Edge estate. It would seem that he and other members of the committee seemed adamant to ignore these and other significant facts surrounding local housing. Furthermore, local councillor Jeanette Sunderland raised these and other issues in a forthright letter to the Secretary of State Eric Pickles MP, following the decision by the Regulatory and Appeals Committee to allow the Simpson Green development. She points out that in the postcode area of BD10 there are 470 houses for sale and 54 to rent, totalling 524. A situation which is also reflected with the adjoining wards of Thackley and Idle, Rose and Windhill, Heckelsall, Bolton and Undercliff and Bailding. totalling over 1,000 available properties in one form or another. Hardly a dearth of property, but more a glut of property. Notwithstanding, there is a major problem which existed for many decades, and one which Bradford Metropolitan Council have consistently either refused to or been unable to resolve to any effective degree of satisfaction, and it's the flow of traffic along the A657 and the A658 at peak periods of the day. A particular hotspot and contributing factor to the increase in traffic congestion is the junction at these two roads at Greengates. On the 9th of October 2012, an article appeared in the Leeds City Council website announcing a £1 billion transport improvements plan as being part of the City Deal discussions. This was the creation of the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund. It was essentially about central government handing down decision-making and spending powers to local governments under a collective umbrella. 6 months later, on the 12th of March 2013, a report had been produced which provided an update on the development of the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund, basically outlining its purpose and objectives. In essence, 6 local authorities were coming together, joining forces to create a transport development fund and combining planning committees in order to upgrade the region's road and rail infrastructure, which, as we know, have been neglected for some considerable period of time. The bulk of these monies for this £1 billion pot is actually coming from the ratepayers of these 6 local authorities, an increased levy on your local council tax. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that this in some way represents the renationalisation of the railways, and that road tax is about to be abolished. You could also argue that this constitutes a form of regional devolution that we certainly haven't been consulted on or had a vote on in a regional referendum. This is a document outlining far-reaching proposals that would steal away local democracy as the electorate slumbers. In fact, so concerned that the cat was about to be let out of the bag by local mandarins implementing a tax levy on the local electorate above 2%, on the 30th of October 2013, it was announced that a new law had been introduced into the Queen's speech, stating that any such levy that pushes a council's annual increase in council tax bills above 2% must now be put to a local referendum. Considering this fund is to be administered by the newly formed West Yorkshire Combined Authority, a local referendum covering an unelected body with the powers of setting local taxation may be difficult to explain to the local electorate. Putting that to one side for a moment, this report also produced appendices. Appendix A, West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund Scheme List, an initial prioritised wish list or to-do list for the 6 contributing local authorities. And here we can see scheme name, Harrogate Road, New Line Junction. And here we can see the outline scheme description. All of the approaches to this junction would be improved to relieve the heavy congestion which currently afflicts the junction at peak hours. Pedestrian and cycling facilities will also be provided at the junction where none currently exist. Summary of scheme impacts. This scheme would address a heavily congested junction in North Bradford, and by providing improved highway access would create increased housing and employment opportunities in the area and enhance connectivity into Bradford from the airport, access to the new Appley Bridge rail station and highway access between Leeds and North Bradford and Airedale. So it would appear that some of the monies provided to the fund by Bradford ratepayers is at least going to be used to improve Greengates traffic junction. But wait a minute, there's a slight caveat to this. Fund costs, paragraph 2.37. The cost estimates of the core projects, when combined with the gateway projects and the development of the transformational schemes, amount to a sum in the region of between £850 million to £1.1 billion, depending on the level of optimism bias assumed. All that means is expect positive events in the future, even when there's no evidence to support such expectations. These costs will be refined during the detailed development of schemes. However, the working assumption is that a fund of £1 billion is set as an appropriate level. Now, it should be noted that some schemes have been included as core projects based on assumptions that each district has made on the level of third-party contributions which could be gained from Section 106 payments. The assumption is that each district would be responsible for ensuring that level of third-party contribution would be secured and would not be met from the fund. Now, it could be argued that the funding scheme needs some initial successes in order to sell the new city deal to the local electorate of the 6 contributing authorities. However, there isn't yet enough in the funding pot to finance all the projects or the schemes. Therefore, the fund will stump up some of the monies, but the local authority who will directly benefit from the completed project or scheme has to secure monies through S106 agreements in order to release the funds from the pot. Now let's take a look at the date of this progress report with its Appendix A describing the Greengates Junction project. 12th of March 2013. So Bradford Council knew then that it needed to secure about £2 million in S106 agreements in order to release £5 million from the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund pot. Interestingly, the planning application for Persimmon Housing to build 270 houses at Court Farm was submitted on the 7th of October 2013, and the application by Miller Homes to build 268 houses on Simpson Green was submitted on the 20th of January 2014. Is it any wonder that Bradford Council felt confident and able to neglect its maintenance of its replacement unitary development plan when it was actively seeking and inviting housing developers to submit building applications on prime Greenfield sites in order to secure S106 funding?